Welcome to a new edition of the Reigns on the Cardinals podcast. Rob Reigns, Mike Reigns, STLSportsPage.com, coming to you on Thursday. The Cardinals with the day off after losing 2 out of 3 games against the Detroit Tigers in a good series, though.
A great, very competitive series. I think you look at that middle game and you're a little frustrated that you fight back so hard against Tyreek Skubal and you lose that one. But hey, if we're frustrated that we're losing to the best team in MLB right now, I think that means we're in a pretty good place.
And it comes after the Cardinals go 7-2 on the road trip, which, as I know we talked about a week ago, you kind of have some doubts about how that 9-game trip is going to go when it begins. But in fact, that they played very well, playing very competitive baseball. A lot to be excited about with this team.
Seems to be a lot of close ball games, right? You can't count this team out. They get down, they come right back. And the thing about one-run ball games is they're just going to kind of run in ebbs and flows, and maybe you'll be on the right side of a bunch of them here soon.
And I think the loss on Wednesday was the first time that they lost that they had. Wasn't a one-run game for a couple of weeks. It was actually the first time that they've lost back-to-back. Well, yeah, if they'd done this, if they did that, then maybe things would have been different. And I know you kind of felt that way with some of the moves that were or were not made, particularly in that middle ball game.
Yeah, certainly a lot of positives with this ball club that we could look at, right? And there are things where we can sit back and say, well, what if we did this? What if we did that? And I think if we're able to dissect it that minute, then that means there are a lot of positives, right? First off, I would say in that game, you got the bases loaded and the tying run, I believe, if I remember correctly. Why is Pozo taking that at bat with the bases loaded when you have Alec Burleson and Nolan Gorman still on the bench?
It all comes down to matchups, and I think one of the things about baseball is that it's always a great sport to hindsight. It's always a great look in the rearview mirror and say if this had happened, if that had happened, and it's one of those things too. It's what I always say about managers, and not just the current Cardinal manager, but anybody in the history of the game is a move can either work or not work. And it looks all of a sudden it looks great if it works. It was a perfect move, but even still may not have made sense, on a strategic standpoint. So I think it's one of those things that, a manager has a lot of decisions to make during a ball game. Sometimes you have more than other games. I think particularly like in a game like Wednesday, there were a lot of movement back and forth on both teams, Detroit as well as the Cardinals. You knew Detroit was going to have a lot of moves because they intended to make it a bullpen game, so you knew their pitchers were not going to go very deep into the ball game. But sometimes it just seems like you make a move, even though it's not really necessarily any strategy or debate behind it. And I thought that's what happened a few of the times in some of those instances in that series.
It's just that when we talk about runways, and that's what we've heard this term a lot throughout the offseason, throughout spring training, is that we're going to give these guys runways. Well, at what point does Nolan Gorman see that runway if he's only getting one at bat here and there? And so that's my overall concern with a guy like Pozo is if we're carrying 3 catchers, that means you're going to primarily DH Herrera, which means you're opting for the Pages bat in the lineup instead of Burleson or Gorman.
And it seems like you've also got almost, in one sense, you can look at it, 2 wasted spots on the roster. If Pozo's only, going to not necessarily be anything other than your third catcher, because Herrera caught on Wednesday, so he's still going to catch some, even though he's DHing a lot. But then you're also carrying Barrero too as a backup infielder, and he's not getting very many opportunities to play. So it's almost like you're playing, with a couple of less players short, and you still are getting a situation where if Herrera is playing, and we're going to talk about this in more detail later on in the podcast, but you're getting a situation where Walker, Gorman, and Burleson almost guaranteed that only one of those 3 guys is going to be in the lineup on a regular basis because you're having Herrera be the DH.
And I think that's where the larger question comes down to. Yes, this team is playing well right now. What is the goal of this team? To get the young kids ready to make it to the postseason, to win a World Series? What's our ultimate goal? Now that the team is playing well, does that change the thought process?
Yeah, that's going to be a big question that we're going to address. This edition of Reigns on the Cardinals podcast brought to you by our friends at Drury Hotels. Encourage you to check out all of the Drury locations anywhere you're planning on traveling. Memorial Day weekend coming up, the start of kickoff kind of to the summer plans. So I'm sure everybody's making their plans for travel this summer. So be sure to check out all the Drury Hotel locations. You can get a direct link to the Drury Hotel website off of our website, stlsportspage.com.
And don't forget, you can find this podcast anywhere that you listen to your podcasts, on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, wherever they may be. We really would appreciate it if you could go through and follow us, like us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, all of those. Every little bit that we get just helps kind of grow this podcast and reach more people. So we really appreciate it if we can get some help trying to reach a few new folks.
Yeah, and also same thing with the newsletter. Don't forget you can go to the website, stlsportspage.com, sign up for our weekly newsletter. It comes straight to your email, gives you all the links and everything, all the stories that we have during the week, so you won't miss out on that. And before we go any further, too, we also should take a moment to mention that it is Memorial Day weekend, and we want to salute all the people who died and are serving our country, and remembering them this weekend, going out to Jefferson National Barracks Cemetery. You'll see all the flags, and it'll be always a somber weekend, but a lot of activities going on, as well as a story up on stlsportspage.com about some of those activities in the St. Louis area if you're looking to go out and do something this weekend. Hopefully the weather will cooperate.
Hopefully it will, yes. And if you do go by Jefferson Barracks, make sure to stop by the grave of Grandpa Jack Tippett to make sure that you do your best to remember those who have died serving our country.
Okay, getting back to the Cardinals. The other thing I have that I had some questions about that came up during the Detroit series, and it's not really a new question because we've talked about it before. Is I still think there's some issues with in the bullpen with this club.
And I think, to me, some of the issues in the bullpen lie in the manager's use of when he brings guys in and who he brings in. Now, we have talked long and multiple times on this podcast and not on this podcast. Don't have someone in the bullpen if you don't trust him in a game, or don't use them. But Chris Roycroft seems to really be struggling out there right now, and we continue to use him in high leverage situations.
Yeah, and to Ollie's credit, he will explain why he made the moves that he made. I mean, he has a reason behind this loose use of pitchers and maybe information that is not available to the press, not available to the public. But he does have a reason why he's using people when he pitches them. And that's why, again, I kind of get back to what I talked about a minute ago, was sometimes a move works and sometimes a move doesn't work. And we're always there to quickly second guess it when it doesn't work. So that's the situation. But go ahead.
And I understand there's analytics a lot. And believe me, I'm a big fan of analytics for a lot of reasons. Yeah. But I'm also a fan of watching pitchers the way that they're performing. And I think that sometimes we pull the hook a little bit too early on our starters. The other day, 79 pitches for Michaelis when he comes out of the game. And I get it that you want that lefty-lefty matchup, and I understand that to an extent, but you also got to realize, if you pull a pitcher a little bit early, for example, bring in Leahy, well, then all of a sudden the next day when you probably wanted Leahy instead of Roycroft, he's not available.
Well, and the other thing about the game on Tuesday with Leahy specifically is, and this gets back into the larger point I'm going to make here in a second, is I think – he comes in the eighth inning, gets his guy out, and then I don't think I didn't get a chance to talk to him about this, but I don't think he probably expected to go back out and pitch the ninth inning. And I think a lot of times when the relief pitcher comes out of a ball game and he thinks he's done his job and he thinks he's done for the night, and then all of a sudden he finds out he's going back for the next inning, it sometimes doesn't work out because you've already kind of checked out mentally there and shut it down. And I'm not sure exactly that's what happened in that ball game. It kind of looked like it to me, because then he gives up those two hits to the left-handed hitters, which he has not done hardly at all year. And he's human. I mean, you're going to have nights when you don't have it. It just happens. We've seen it with Helsley, but that's the perfect spot in that ninth inning where they should have used Ryan Helsley.
And that's what I was just going to get to too. Ollie has figured out with Helsley, he can't pitch multiple innings. And maybe that's the path of Leahy, is just one inning at a time. And if you do that, could he have then pitched one inning the next day and not had to go to Roycroft? Possibly. And then we get back to the point of Helsley, who's, I don't think, being utilized correctly at all.
I looked at that up as of yesterday. He's pitched 6 games in May out of the 19 the Cardinals have played coming into the off day here on Thursday. And he has pitched once in the last week. So now he's going to go over a week before the game on Friday night with only 1 inning of work. And he just cannot, even I don't care how much you throw in the bullpen and on the side, you can't be sharp and in a game-like situation if you're not getting that opportunity to pitch. And okay, I understand it was not a safe situation. It was a tie game in the 9th inning, but there's no guarantee you're getting to the 10th inning. And it's still not going to be a safe situation in the 10th inning either. So I pitch him in the 9th and see what happens.
And I can think of, there were at least 2 one-run games on the road trip and one one-run game here. So to me, I understand that you have a closer for a reason, but Ollie has said multiple times before that you may not necessarily see Helsley in the closer role. You may just see him in tight game situations, but yet we haven't seen that come out at all. He's made that comment, but we haven't seen that. So I don't know why you wouldn't, if he's your best pitcher in the bullpen, and that's typically what you say in a closer, right? Why wouldn't you use him in the highest leverage situation, regardless of whether it's a safe situation or not?
So we'll see how that goes forward. Hopefully he'll get a couple opportunities to pitch in the Arizona series because it means the Cardinals have a lead and a chance to save the ball game. So, but he needs to pitch. I mean, that's the thing is they're kind of wasting Ryan Helsley in my mind.
The positive through all of this, though, is the games are much closer than they were last year.
True.
The run differential standpoint last year, we were getting blown out of games here and there. And this year, it's a much more positive +40. They're +40 in run differential. So when that's happening, you're going to win a lot of games. So the fact that we can nitpick little things is a good sign.
That is correct. And I think the other thing is you look at the big picture, the Cardinals played 50 ball games, so they're almost 4 games away from the 1/3 point of the season, which is, I think, a relatively decent sample size. I know there's a lot, 2/3 of the season to go, but I think you've got enough of a feel now for what this team has and what they don't have and who's playing well and who's not. And I think the big picture is it's probably a better team right now than either you or I expected and maybe everybody else expected before the season began.
I think it is for sure. And I think the main reason for that is the starting rotation has really come through a lot stronger than we thought they would. And the other reason is some of these young kids are really playing very well. And you cannot say enough about the offensive play of Ivan Herrera.
No, he's been terrific since he got back. He was terrific before he got hurt, with the 3 home run game, but and obviously, playing really well. I still, I kind of like the fact that they're DHing him because I think it takes the pressure off the catching situation because he wasn't throwing the ball well. I think you can still find some spots where he can catch when a team, facing a team that doesn't really tend to run an awful lot. But the way Pages has caught and worked with the pitchers, I think that's a very good, kind of thing that they have going there. I think you have to be very impressed with the play of Victor Scott II. Obviously been night and day difference from what he was a year ago. You have to be impressed with how Libator has handled his move to the starting rotation. Matz has done a very good job in the hybrid role that he's had. And then, Brendan Donovan's leading the league in hits. So I think there's a lot of really good things. It's a really, fun club to watch. And as we mentioned, there's only, even the games that they've lost, they've been competitive.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is when you're watching these games, the team is a lot of fun, and you think they can come back no matter what's happening. I think that's what makes it so exciting and so much fun. And so that's where, it's really cool to see how this team is shaping up. And I think it's better than any of us thought it was going to be.
So saying that, then I think the next test is going to be to see how the fans respond to this team because we had 2 good crowds on the Detroit series. That I think they announced 31,000 on Tuesday night. I was hoping for good weather this weekend against Arizona. 3 home games, as we mentioned, on Memorial Day weekend. The weather, unfortunately, the forecast is not very good, so this may not be a good test. But 16 home games in June, and I have a point I want to make about this is I think it's time for the fans to, if they are boycotting because they were mad at ownership and didn't make any moves over the winter, I think it's time to buy some tickets and come out and watch this ball club. So I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by what you see.
And the question that I would ask to fans is, what do you want? And when you watch this team, do you want a competitive ball club that can go out and win the Central Division? Well, that's what this team is doing. They're in second place. They're 3 games behind the Cubs. Now, granted, the Cubs just got 3 with the White Sox and 3 with the Marlins. So we'll get our turn to take those at the same time.
Schedule evens out.
The schedule evens out. We all get to play the Rockies 3 games too. So everybody gets those 3 wins. But anyways, what I'm getting at is that this team is a lot of fun and they're winning ball games. So whatever message you're trying to send, I think the kids with the chip on the shoulder are sending the message back to you of, hey, we're here to prove something and we're here to win.
And I think the other part of that is too, though, that I think that there is a good relationship now between what happens in the box office and what this club's going to do at the trading deadline. And that's my bigger point, is because, you got a couple months here. You got 16 home games in June. Be a good chance to school's out, the weather's good. No really reason not to go to the ballpark. But I think and we'll see where this club is as they get toward that trading deadline in the July. I realize we got a lot of games before we get to that point. But if the Cardinals are still in a position where they're kind of hanging around, okay, well, everybody expected them to be sellers at the trade deadline. You got a lot of free agents to be, a lot of, some contracts that you could probably try to move, players that you don't expect back in 2026 here are free agents. But if they think they have a chance to win the division, do they forget about making those trades and hold on to all those guys? And my point being this is, I think there's a better chance that they would hold on to those guys if they know they're drawing 35 to 40,000 people a night at the ballpark, because I think they feel like, okay, we make these trades to get better for 2026 and beyond. Well, then all of a sudden there's a backlash and the attendance drops again. But if the attendance is still averaging 20 to 25,000 for some of those games, I think they have a lot easier decision to make as far as making those trades, because they don't think trading away some of those potential free agents would impact the attendance the last couple of months.
The fan support can really drive a lot of these decisions moving forward. I really think that too, because like you said, if there's 35 to 40,000 people averaging these games over June and July, they're going to look back and say, hey, if we cut this team, then all of a sudden there's going to be no support. We're not going to make any money, and we're going to have to buy fan support all over again. Well, if people are coming and supporting the team, then all of a sudden it's going to be, hey, if we make one or two moves to be stronger and win this division, then all of a sudden we can get playoff money and everything else. So I think the fan support over the next 2 months can really drive the decisions of how this team performs and what they do at the deadline.
And I also think it's this too. I think it's going to be dictated by what you can get back for some of these potential free agents, because the other flip side of that is too, say you were to trade one or two of those starting pitchers that are eligible to be free agents. Well, not only do you get something back for them, hopefully a good return, a prospect or something, but then by the same token, you also open up one or two spots in that rotation for the next final 2 months of the season that maybe can go to Michael McGreevy, maybe can go to Quinn Matthews, maybe could go to Koa Roby, maybe go to Tink Hence, and you kind of have a little better knowledge again of what you've got to work with going forward in 2026. So there's a big benefit to that, but it has to work out right for that to happen.
And I think there's a big test to these starting 5 pitchers that we have right now over the next 2 months to really see how they perform, because the last time through the rotation, Sonny, Libby, and Michaelis, very good. Combined 1 run, those 3 gave up. Mm-hmm. The other 2, in Palante and Fetty, not great. Now, Fetty had 2 really good starts in a row and then 1 really bad start. So which Fetty's going to show up? And I think that's where we talk about runway. Mm-hmm. So you talk about making trades and looking what's out there. Is the trade just bringing up a McGreevy or a letting Graceffo start or letting Tink Hence, some of these guys get that start over Fetty or Palante? Or do you try to chip one of the better pitchers because you can get something for them, right? That's going to be the really interesting conversation to see.
It's going to be a fascinating decision to me, what they do, because I can see it going any number of directions. And the other fascinating part to me about the trade deadline this year is, okay, say they're in a position to make a trade, to deal off 1 or 2 of the potential free agents and get some prospects back in return. I want to know who makes that call on the trade. I want to know if it's John Mozeliak or Chaim Bloom, or if it's a combination of the two, because I think, it's going to impact the trade. I mean, who makes that final call is going to be important in what they do.
And the other thing that's really fascinating to me is, over the last 2 years, you could say the fan support for John Mozeliak has really gone down, right? Because they just haven't seen the return in him lately. Now, he's done a lot for this organization, don't get me wrong, but I think people look at it lately as, what have you done lately, right? Mm-hmm. So what memory does John Mozeliak want to leave with St. Louis? Right. Does he want to try to go out and win a division and get to the playoffs and see what happens? Because he wanted to try to set this team up for success for 26, which is why the kind of rebuild and let the young kids play. Well, the young kids are proving they can win. So now what do you try to do here with that? Do you try to step up, add a few pieces, and get in the postseason and see what happens, like has been Mozeliak's MO every year he's been here?
It's going to be interesting just to see what happens. And of course, a big part of that will be dictated by how this team plays on the field. And here's the other, there's 2 other things I want to get to. One is, does it seem like to you that they have played an awful lot of games against American League teams.
It does seem like we've played some stronger competition to start with, right? And I think that's probably a good thing when you look back at the record and say, hey, we've played really good teams and we're still in a good spot.
I just think it's weird that they're playing so many games against the American. It's 18 out of 50, which I guess is from a mathematical standpoint is, not that many. But now they got this upcoming road trip after this homestand. Next week they go to Baltimore and Texas. So after that next trip, it'll be 24 out of 59 games against American League clubs, almost exactly half. You played 3 games against Milwaukee. You don't play the Cubs until June 23rd. The schedule is just weird.
It is weird, but the good news is as long as you're staying competitive and within 2-3 games of the Cubs, you're right where you need to be, right? And so win the games on the schedule that you can, and then when you get to play the teams like the Pirates and the Reds that are, lower level division opponents, you have to take care of business.
So that's one of the things I'm going to be curious to watch over the next couple of months is how their team plays in general, and then as far as what happens with attendance, especially at home games. The other thing I think that's going to, and then we also talked about how the bullpen is going to be used. The other thing I think is going to be an interesting decision to watch over the next few weeks is playing time, how it's split up between Walker, Gorman, and Burleson.
I think it's going to be very interesting. And I think to me, you've probably got about a month, I would say. Give it that June 25, June 30, somewhere in that range, where the team is going to have to decide, okay, do we try to play someone like Gorman to showcase them from a trade standpoint before the trade deadline? Or do we start to, get some of the kids up here and give them a few starts in July so that we can figure out who we try to trade? So I think you've got about a month to figure out, is this team legit and going for the postseason this year, or are we just playing really well right now?
And I think the other part of that too, though, then is with Herrera being the DH on probably at least 4 times a week at the moment, maybe, and catching the other night, you really only have one spot in that lineup. I mean, unless you're giving Donovan a day off, unless you're giving Nootbaar a day off, you really only have one spot in that lineup for either Burleson, Walker, or Gorman. And how's that really fair to them?
And I think that's where the question becomes, what's more important, the defense of Pages or the offense of Herrera? Because if it's the offense of Herrera, then you got to figure out another way to control the run game with the pitchers. Because
right.
they can control part of that too. If you figure out how to get quicker to home or a quicker motion or something, is there a way that the pitchers can help control the game so that Herrera goes back to catching and you can work Gorman and Burleson in more games?
Because I think you have seen some signs from Walker. He hit the home run the other night. He had a big 2-run double. He's had some signs of life that maybe things are clicking a little bit, and certainly his defense has been much improved. So I understand giving him the bulk of those opportunities, but I think you cannot give the chance to Gorman and Burleson, because that's what you said you were going to do coming into this season. And I think you have to stick to that.
And I think the interesting thing too is Walker's had more playing time. And so can he work through the ebbs and flows of a not being great at a time in a slump and getting better? And I think that's what you're seeing him do now, and he's starting to come out of it. Gorman doesn't have that opportunity yet because he's not getting the same at-bats. So it's harder for him to go out there and put competitive at-bats together when you're not seeing consistent playing time.
I think he's had 3 starts over the last 10 days or so, if memory serves me correctly. So we'll be watching for that. Obviously, all of the other news as well coming up with the ball club. 3 games against Arizona at home this weekend, then go back on the road to Baltimore and Texas, and we'll have it all covered for you here on STLSportsPage.com. Mike, enjoy the weekend. We'll be back soon with another edition of Rains on the Cardinals podcast. For Mike Rains, Rob Rains, STLSportsPage.com. Have a great day, everybody.